Hey, what's up? This is Lauv, and this is Breaking Modern Loneliness on World Mental Health Day. I'm really excited to share with you guys this panel. It's called Finding Mental Health in Isolation. And on this panel, we've got Jesse Heyman from Jack.org, Wenji, Tessa Violet, Liz Lockery, and Francis Arevalo here to share their experiences and what they've learned about mental health. I hope you guys enjoy. And remember, if you're struggling or need someone to talk to, there are a ton of resources at lauvsongs.com/help. And yeah, just don't hesitate to reach out.
Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning in. My name's Jesse Heyman. I'm the Vice President at Jack.org. For those that haven't heard about Jack.org, Jack.org is the only Canadian charity that trains and empowers young leaders to revolutionize mental health. Revolution's a big word, so just to break that down for you, what that means for us is a country where young people are comfortable talking about mental health, where they understand how to identify if they're struggling with their mental health or if their friends or people around them are, and know how to ask for help if they need it. And the last part, which is the biggest part, is making sure that they have access to support they need when they ask for it and the support that they deserve. So that's what we do. We have thousands of young leaders across the country that are working every day to break down barriers in their communities. And I'm extremely excited for this conversation. The Blue Boy Foundation, Lauv, and Microsoft called a few weeks ago and asked if we'd be interested in being a part of a conversation around mental health, COVID, and music. And I jumped at the opportunity, and Jack.org is excited to be a part of it. And there's a few reasons for that, and I want to run through that a little bit. And it starts with the number 25%. And in Canada, what that number stands for is the amount of young people, 25% of all young people that die every year in Canada, 25% of them die by suicide. And that's obviously an extremely scary number. It's also a number that hasn't changed in over a decade. So we were in a youth mental health crisis well before COVID. What that says is that young people are significantly struggling. Now, when you take COVID and you add in what is essentially complete uncertainty around everything, whether it's your income, your job, school, seeing your friends, going to see your therapist in person again, what you end up with is young people struggling in a significant way. All of those uncertain pieces lead to anxiety, and it might be anxiety for the first time for people that have never experienced it before. And for those that struggle with a mental illness or struggle with their mental health, that increased anxiety obviously leads to increased struggle. And so what it means is that young people across the globe are struggling in a pretty severe way, and that more than ever, we need to be having conversations like this and normalizing the mental health conversation and making sure people understand that they're truly not alone, but not only that they're not alone, because that's just the beginning of the conversation, but sharing different ways that we cope so that people can get inspiration from them and also normalize just the conversation and taking care of ourselves. That's not where I stop, though, because music means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to every single one of our artists on this call, and hopefully the people that are tuning in as well. And there's two sides of that for me. One is anywhere you see great creativity or brilliant art, you often find people that are also have struggled or are struggling with their mental health. And for that reason, in the music industry, you see a lot of musicians struggling, whether it's with addictions or with suicide. There's a lot of musicians that are out there struggling, and we need to make sure we bring up those conversations and allow musicians to know that, one, it's okay to ask for help, it's okay to look for help, and also understand the avenues that are in front of them to get the help that they need. And then the other side, which comes from taking care of the music industry and the musicians within it, is that music has a power to transcend borders and barriers like no other medium we've maybe ever seen throughout history. And on top of that, thank you, Tessa.
The universal language.
On top of that, we need to change attitudes and behaviors when it comes to mental health. And I don't know of a more powerful medium to do that than music. So if we can make sure that musicians are healthy and happy and getting the support that they need, and also encourage the industry to start speaking about mental health more, whether it's one-to-one conversations like this in a panel setting or in your actual music, we can make a lot of change. So for those reasons, I'm super excited to have this conversation, honored to be asked to be a part of it, and thankful to Microsoft, to the Blue Boy Foundation, and to Lauv for having us and hosting this discussion. So with that said, I get to kick it off with an awesome panel of artists from across the globe, and I'll just quickly introduce you guys. In the bottom left of my screen, hopefully in yours too, we have Wenji, when she was born in China, raised in Australia. In the top left, if we go up, we have Tessa hailing from LA, United States. In our bottom right, we have Francis Aravallo from British Columbia, Canada. And in the top right, we have Liz Lockery from Toronto, Canada, very close to me right now, just down the street or something like that. With that intro, I want to leave it to you guys to talk a little bit about your relationship with mental health, whether that's from growing up or currently or just throughout your entire journey, and to just introduce yourselves to the people watching. So if you don't mind, I'm going to start with my friend Liz Lockery.
Cool. So I guess that's because I'm closest to you geographically.
Exactly
Might as well. Okay, cool. Well, I'm super grateful to be able to be here and have this important conversation around mental health. I think it's never been more important. And my journey, I guess, with dealing with maybe battling a little bit with my mental health began really early in my career. Music has always been what I've been passionate about. And so from a young age, I was traveling between like New York and LA and in meetings and sessions, and realizing that so much of my identity was kind of projected onto me from a really young age. And sort of as I've gotten older, I've learned to navigate what that looks like, how to sort of unpack maybe the truths that I believed about myself growing up in this industry, which is, it's challenging, it's cutthroat, you know, where there's always sort of people with opinions about who you should be and what you should say and do. And I am currently in a place now where, of course, I've grown up and my music has really become a form of expression for me. So I can kind of say, like, doesn't matter what people want from me. It's really about using my art as a vessel for all of the things that I'm feeling. And I guess that extends to where we are now. Is I really believe that everybody, whether you're an artist or not, I believe that everybody has a gift that they've been given so that they can give back, or a way that they can sort of transmute what they're feeling into something that's relatable and relevant and potentially healing to others. So I hope that through my expression now, as I become more confident and transparent in including my healing journey in my music, I just hope that I'm encouraging others to do the same, or maybe they see a piece of themselves in that work. And I guess that extends to where I am now, where I've had many friends around me in the music industry struggle with their mental health, almost lost a really close friend of mine through her own battle with her mental health. And so just more and more, I think it's becoming increasingly important for me artistically to be transparent about these real issues that so many of us are facing. And I think if it comes through in the music, that really has a potential to shift the dial, break the stigma, and get this conversation happening on a daily basis throughout the community.
Thanks so much for that, Liz. That was fantastically said. And I'm excited to ask a question or two about it, but I'm going to let everyone go around the clock first. So I'm hoping we can kick it off and over to the incredible Tessa Violet to tell us a little bit about your story and all that you are.
Hello, my name is Tessa Violet. I'm a singer-songwriter, and I struggled with depression and anxiety and suicidal I don't know what the word is, but I had a really hard time in my coming out of high school and for most of my early 20s, but definitely the first bit. And I'm also a sober addict alcoholic. But I think this is a thought I have. I think that depression to me is a disconnect from the truth that you are like infinitely enough valuable and connected to everything. And I feel like I spent a lot of my adult life feeling that life was a punishment I was to endure. And now I feel like every day is a gift and every challenge is a gift for me to grow, and that I have so much to give to the world and everyone. And like Liz said, I believe that everyone else does too. And that idea of the being enough, I feel, this is just my lived experience, I cannot in the same moment know my worth and be depressed. So I've, really, there's a lot of spirituality in my life now to always be touching in with, like, yes, I'm enough, I'm connected to the universe. Every challenge I experience is a gift for me to grow.
Thank you, Tessa. That's beautiful, and you have a way with words, that's for sure. In the conversations that we've had, and I'm excited to ask you a bit about your perspective on self-love and how you continue to love yourself even during tough times. But we'll come back to that. I'll jump over to Francis out in beautiful British Columbia, and curious to hear your thoughts around mental health and your journey.
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm Francis DeRevelo. I use he, him, his pronouns, tuning in from the unceded ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, specifically otherwise known as Vancouver. In music, I typically play the roles of I'm an artist, producer, and songwriter. Adjacent to music and in mental health, I facilitate workshops. I think for me, where this introduction begins is, I think the choice to pursue music, it's not easy. It's also my dream, and it's also the thing I'm most passionate about and care the most about. And so, in my most difficult moments, I think something that keeps me going is like, this is the life I chose, and this is the hardship that comes with it, along with all the beauty that comes with being a musician. In addition to those specific music context challenges, and the challenges that everyone lives with mental health, I also have the added difficulty of living with bipolar disorder type 1. And so I live with mania, I live with depression, I live with the psychotic symptoms because of that, and have attempted suicide once. I think that was in 2015 to 2016. That was the hardest period of my life regarding that story. And then since then, I've recovered from that traumatic period, but I still live with the disorder on a day-to-day basis. And I think maybe the two notable music things that are related to that diagnosis are, in spring of this year, I released an album called The Sound of Healing, which is the first time I had told that story in music form. So it's 10 tracks that detail the story from 2015 to 2020 of how I kind of made my way out of that time of my life. And then I was also featured in a documentary highlighting that story. Have since gone on to participate in things like this, but also I think even more importantly, engage in these conversations with my immediate family, my immediate circle, my music community here. And I think once I've come to learn how to understand and grasp and live with my own mental health challenges, I've then come to a place where I need to learn, and I'm in the process of learning more about the factors outside of me that cause mental health struggles, right? Like pick a system. There's that, and there are systemic issues that cause struggles that can't be solved by the medication that I take. And I think those intersections are ones that I'm even more curious and not just learning about on my own, but also looking to hear what other people on the call think of. That's sort of the snapshot of me, I think.
Thank you so much, Francis. I really appreciate you sharing all that. Not easy to share, and but probably means the world, or I know means the world to me, but also the people watching that can hear your story and hear how far you've come and how you've been able to navigate it. So thank you. I'll kick it over to Wenji, joining us from Australia, to hear a little bit about your story, your cat ears, and the beautiful pink surrounding you.
Okay, well, first of all, hi guys. Love these cat ears. I'm obsessed. I'm a crazy cat lady, FYI. But hi, I'm Wenji. I'm a creator, recording artist, and my journey with mental health has been lifelong. I think it's lifelong for a lot of people. Growing up in high school, I guess I didn't always felt like I belonged very well, and I've always been very much an introvert, and that has been something that has followed me throughout all my childhood and made me feel like something was wrong with me because I was really quiet in class. I didn't back then, introversion wasn't very well known, so I just thought, I was different. Being like Chinese as well, growing up in Australia, I always felt culturally removed somehow as well. And I would be nervous about bringing, my cultural food to school in case I get teased. And back then it wasn't as open and inclusive. And I feel like, growing up, I turned to music to really feel included because I saw, through K-pop, J-pop, and C-pop that there were people that looked like me, and music made me feel included. So I would listen to artists from all over the world and was really, just felt loved through the diversity and seeing a bunch of people from different cultures, doing their thing. And that's something I really aim to do with my music, to make everyone culturally included, which is why I collabed with different artists from all around the world as part of my music project. But with regards to mental health, I struggled with it the most when I started YouTube, because what people don't understand with YouTube is even though there's so many people watching you online, on the other side, it's very isolating. I had a really packed schedule. I was just filming and editing by myself all day. And, there was no one filming me. I was with a tripod and then in front of the editing software. And, if musicians spend a lot of time in their production software, it's the same. It's just you and the screen for hours and hours and hours on end. And I didn't see anyone. And because I was chasing my dream, I was trying to do YouTube after work. So it was like I had sort of limited hours. But then when I quit work and just did YouTube full time, I lost all social support. And I just was obsessed with editing and filming videos. And at one point, I developed really bad social anxiety. I didn't even know it was social anxiety at the time. It was just my friends invited me to this super cool beach trip at the end of the year that I would go with them. Often it was like a tradition. And for the first time in my life, I had no idea why I had to say no to it. I just felt panic rise up when I was thinking about going to see my friends. I'm like, they're my friends. Why am I afraid? And that's when I knew there was something really wrong with how I was living, what I was doing, and most of all, my mental health. And since then, I've been very aware of how I treat myself, and when I get to the point of too much isolation. And, even with starting my music project, it was really, really nerve-wracking because it's something very different. And because I'd already been on YouTube for so long, it was risking that, like, what if I fail? What if I do a bad job? I have so many people watching me fail, it's not building something up. It's, hey, this is me. I want to chase my dreams now. Let's hope I don't fall flat on my face in front of millions and millions of people. So that brought a lot of anxiety, and I didn't know that's what I had. I just felt panicked all the time. Like my heart was like tight, and I had no idea why. My life was great, and I was doing what I love. Why do I feel so, panicked all the time? So I don't know the exact words, because growing up, like, mental health wasn't a big thing in my culture. First of all, Asian culture, we don't like to talk about feelings. We're not very touchy-feely, especially family and stuff like that. We don't really talk about feelings at all, and that has been a norm. So it was very hard for me to identify what it meant and what it was, or find out why. So that's why I love sessions like these. So if people are in that situation where they don't have a supportive community, at least online, there's a bunch of us talking about it. So yeah, I'm currently ambassador of Active Minds with really great mental health resources. So yeah, like, hopefully my journey will help someone. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Wenji. Active Minds is an amazing organization that we know well. So love that you're doing work with them. Do you mind if I jump right back in with you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just a couple of things you said sparked a few thoughts in my head. One of them is you obviously spoke about like loneliness and being an introvert, but spending too much time ends up leading to like more social anxiety which is obviously not what you're hoping for when spending time alone. And I'm curious, COVID related, you've obviously spent a lot of time alone right now. And you're in that space where you don't really have much of a choice. And I'm curious, just on your end, how you're navigating that for others that are either socially anxious or are true introverts, but how do you one identify for yourself when you're spending too much time alone, and during this time, how have you navigated that?
Yep. Well, my first answer is cats. I love them. They always make me feel like, someone's with me. They're always causing trouble. So, it just feels like something's happening around the house. But like on a serious note, I think because of my experience with social anxiety prior, I made it a point to force myself to go out and see someone. And how I've done this and how I found it the most easy is to make an extroverted friend. So have someone in your life that understands your situation and constantly pulling you outside to go somewhere. And that understands when you say like, no, I too much social time for me. I need to go home and recharge. Over the years, I've tried a lot of different things for social interaction, scheduling it in. The most easy and most organic approach I found is having an extroverted friend to really approach you and know what you're going through. Also, like making a point to like reach out online to people. I think I can get into my modes where I go deeper and deeper into introversion, or I call it hermit mode, and basically like just stop interaction altogether. Because I get like when you're creative, I think like you can get stuck in your head or onto an idea or onto some sort of concept, and you can just go down that rabbit hole for days and days without coming out. So it's just scheduling the time for myself, but I try not to focus on them personally. I want to focus on the things that I could change.
Thanks. It's a great tip to have an extroverted friend even that's pulling you out, even more so if they're good at taking rejection for the times that you say
yes.
It makes me think about all the dogs that people are getting now too, that are going to have some serious issues when everyone starts going back to work. I feel like our condo buildings in Toronto are just going to be dogs screaming at each other all the time.
Yes.
Francis, I'm hoping to jump over to you. You mentioned that I believe the album you recently released was the first time you really spoke about your mental health and your journey publicly through your music. And I'm curious, because people share their story for the first time, and sometimes it's a really positive response from their perspective, like it has a positive effect on them, and sometimes it can have the opposite, because sometimes people feel like like they owe people something when they speak up and say something that like now they're supposed to be better and I'm supposed to show strength, which is obviously not the case, but it's a pressure we can put on ourselves. And I'm curious, when you went out there and you put out your story through music, what kind of effect that had on you, and how it affected you?
Yeah, I think that response kind of begins a few years prior, in that like there was a moment where like I had to decide what route I was taking. Like I would show up to, I'd gone through like a very difficult year and a half where I looked different, I acted different, I felt quite different just through the rigor that what my body, my mind were put through. And so, people noticed changes in me, and I didn't quite know how to interact with the friends and family that I had around me. And so there were some people that were like, that's not a real thing. like that's not a real diagnosis. Like, what is that? What is bipolar disorder? Or not even are they not willing to understand? They're just not willing to acknowledge that it exists. And I think there came a time where I had to make a really hard decision for myself. Like, I'm either gonna live this out and be as vocal and as take up spacey with this as I can in my own life. Because if I shut off any part of it, I'm compromising myself, and I'm not showing up fully to me. I'm not showing up fully to my community, and I'm not showing up fully to the world. And so I think for myself, I was like, all right, I'm going to dedicate myself to putting this story into music form so that I can just therapize it for myself and just kind of like process it and like deal with that trauma. But at the same time, kind of similar to something you touched on, is like turn it into something that can help other people heal. And so I think that was the key. Those two pieces were the key decision for me. One was that I needed to do it for myself, and two was that it could help someone else. And when I was in the throes of my own depression, at that time, I didn't know anyone that looked like me that was openly speaking about their experience with bipolar disorder. I would literally be like, Filipino bipolar man, and I'd be like, I don't know who these people are. And so there's specific experiences that I have with my upbringing and my culture that I wanted to get feedback about. Like I wanted to know how other people deal with their Filipino families who don't agree that mental illness is a real thing. I wanted to figure out those specific things, and I couldn't. And so I think for me, knowing that there would be judgment, knowing that there would be dismissing, I knew that I had to be the person that I needed way back when, because somebody might need that too. And so when I went through the process of like committing to that project, every year, so April 27th is an important date in my recovery. And so every April 27th from 2015 and on, I was like, okay, I'm going to drop it this April 27th. And then this April 27th. And every single year I was like, no, it's not ready. And the reason that the project wasn't ready was because I personally was not ready. And like, I hadn't come to a place in my own healing that I can, turn it into a thing to share with other people and offer to other people. I think there was a moment where someone had a conversation with me where they were just like, oh, you just want to benefit from your story. It was that simple. And so that was a cause for, I understood where it was coming from, and I understood what that criticism is rooted in, but
what criticism is that rooted in? It's like, yeah, why not benefit from your story, whatever that story is. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, that's great.
I disagree with that dude.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I also disagree. I mean, the reason I put it out is because I disagreed. But like, I agreed with myself more. And so, but when I think what he was trying to say was like, you're trying to like profit off of your own story. Like that was the main driving reason to put that thing into existence. And so that was like, just even having the conversation, even though I disagreed, was one where I was like, I need to really connect with the reason why I'm doing this. The last year that I put off, like 2019, it was almost ready. And I was like, no, there's some part of it that's like lacking in like the original intention that I had when I started putting the project together. Because, that's 2019, I'm starting to think like, what's the cover art? Do I market this? Like this feels, it's simultaneously is the most important thing I could probably ever put out in the time I've been alive. And at the same time, it's the thing that I want to push the least, which is a really weird dissonance to live through. And so my approach was in 2020, I was like, project's done. Another year isn't going to serve this project. I'm going to put it out. Whoever is meant to listen to it will listen to it. If that's all it ever becomes, then I'm fine. But I mean, just to kind of like wrap it all up, I think the fact that we now get the chance to talk about it in this space with other people who are going through their own kinds of journeys is just, it's almost like added benefit for me at this point, where I'm like, oh wow, like it's kind of like a sharing circle of like what did your healing and your therapy turn into? Yeah.
Well, first of all, Francis, you are remarkably well spoken. I can literally sit here and just listen to you, though, like for the next hour. I think the way you communicate, and you're obviously a writer for a reason and a musician for a reason. So thank you for sharing all that. I'll also say that like you should profit off of it. It's your story. You can do what the hell you want with it. And on the other side of that, the truth is the more that you profit off of it and the success you see with it, the Filipino community profits off of it by having a young Filipino man out there talking to other young Filipinos, and specifically Filipino men who, as we know, men struggle with their mental health and die by suicide at an extremely increased rate. largely because we're not comfortable talking about it. For reasons like people making other men that are going to go out there and share something amazing that can help you, and try to hold that back or not be comfortable with it. So one, I think it's amazing. I'm thrilled that you did. And two, I am sure it's helping a lot of people within your community and in general. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's great. And I'm excited to lean into more of your story. I'm going to jump over to Liz, and I'm going to jump a little bit into a conversation that we didn't have here, but we've had in the past. That I think is amazing about you. You start your story essentially with speaking about your family and how they didn't really have an understanding for mental health when you first started to struggle. And if you fast forward however many years, you are a big time advocate for mental health. You run your own school programs. You work with young people all the time. And that's an incredible transition. And I'm just curious how, as like a young woman, you were a part of a family that wasn't necessarily so supportive of the mental health conversation, and managed to find and get help on your own at a time when like no one's talking about mental health to begin with. I think it's amazing. And then to see where you ended up is also incredible. But I would love for you to speak to a little bit about that.
Thank you for that intro. I mean, it's interesting to look back, I guess, at the journey and to see how it's evolved. It's not something that I really do too often, because just from my perspective, like I'm just, like you said, Francis, sort of like living out, I guess, these little moments of healing. And when you look back on the journey, it's just really interesting to see how that can evolve from something that's like really scary to something that now is an empowering piece of my story. And it's true that, yeah, initially when I started to just question, like, am I okay? I feel anxious. I feel overwhelmed. I feel like there isn't, a space where I can put these thoughts. I knew, okay, I should probably talk to somebody about this stuff. And I just wasn't comfortable to bring it up to my parents, whether or not they would have received it openly or not. I just felt like there was this barrier of being emotionally vulnerable in my home. And they may hear this and be like, what? Like, you can talk to us. But I just didn't feel that, and maybe because it wasn't modeled to me, like growing up just generationally, feelings and mental health weren't really talked about. And so I actively started to go to therapy without them knowing from a young age. And it was just this like secret for me. And it was an issue because eventually I couldn't afford it. I was like, it was before I had a job. I was in high school, and it was like I was actually behind a couple payments with my therapist. And it was just this like awkward situation where, maybe if I had felt more comfortable or we had created that dynamic in the home, that process of actually getting help, may have looked a little smoother. But I can look back on that now and I can say, that girl was determined. She was aware. She was becoming more in touch with herself. And I can say, like, good on you, kid. Like, you did what you had to do. There's no shame in that. And a lot of, I think, the identity issues that I faced stemmed from being pretty severely bullied growing up. In many circumstances in my life, just feeling like an outcast, specifically in like a school setting. And I think my saving grace amidst all of that has been my music. It's been this vessel that I can pour into, and it's honestly been the only space that I have felt a sense of belonging in. Whether that be for the people in my community or simply just because I know that it'll always be there for me when I need to pour something out. And so the school workshop was born from a desire to see everybody discover what that is for them. I think, like I was saying, like whether it's music, whatever you're passionate about, like we all have a gifting in some area. And I think, touching on what you said, Tessa, like that stems from a deep sense of self-worth and understanding, and to come to a place where I have felt like, what, not only do I have something to give, but I'm actually confident enough to share it with the world in my timing. Like, touching on so many great things that have been said, but Francis, you talked about like sharing things when you are ready to. I think, when we're in these spaces where our priority is encouraging others, there can be almost a sense of pressure or urgency about sharing like the struggles that we're in the midst of. But, you know, there's something to be said about working through it and then sort of sharing when, you know, when we're ready to have those conversations. I've sort of been on both sides where like some of my music that I released was about circumstances that I realized after putting them out that I hadn't even really taken the time to like unpack where my heart was really at with that. And so I think it's just so interesting doing this in such a, I guess, a public way where like our music just ends up sort of being this like amplification of our feelings and experiences. And we have to be, you know, prepared to back that up and to share the inspiration behind it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I guess like the full circle scenario has been being in a place now where all those moments of fear and vulnerability and insecurity and doubt and shame have manifested in now this ability for me to share the other side of that, what it looks like to be a little more empowered. I still carry all that with me, but you know, now I'm in a place where I can confidently share the healing that comes with what it means to share your gift. Like it's really a blessing more than anything else.
Thanks so much, Liz. It is a blessing. I also think you touched on an important point of like, it's zero pressure, and there should be zero pressure from anyone to feel like they do have to share a story. And I think it's actually something that does need to be said in today's culture, especially around mental health, because it's kind of become a little bit cool to share your story about mental health. And I don't mean that in a bad way at all. I think that's a great thing. I think it's fantastic that we're comfortable sharing. And those that are comfortable and feel safe doing so should do so, because it really does help people that are listening, whether it's a friend or it's a celebrity that has fans that are listening. But the necessity to do so is something that shouldn't be there. And I think it's an important message to send to young people right now, that you don't have to share anything. You can do that on your own terms when you're ready, if you want to. But if you do want to, absolutely go for it. But everything in regards to your mental wellness should be on your terms and only your terms. So yeah, thank you so much for that. And I'm curious, when a young person, because I know you deal in the school setting and you work with groups of young people, when a young person comes to you and I'm sure has shared at some point that they're struggling with their mental health, but their home life isn't that supportive or that sort of thing, what do you say to those people?
Well, I think it's really, really important to have a community in some capacity. Like, I think family is not necessarily just who is in your bloodline. You know, it can be mentors, even sometimes teachers, or just like a trusting friend group. I think also an important conversation is to talk about the relationship that you have with yourself. Not to say that like we should be able to heal all of our own problems on our own, but I think this conversation about creating like a filtration system for our thoughts is something that needs to be had. And that's something that I'll often just talk to people about when it's a one-on-one conversation, is like, what does your inner voice sound like? And when it extends to like all this time that we're spending alone, I think that's been huge. Like, all we have is time to listen to ourselves, but at the same time, there's often these voices that creep up that are like full of doubt or, you know, condemnation or shame. Like we hear so many different thoughts. So how do we differentiate which is our authentic, truest voice? And often I will just say that like your true voice is rooted in love. And so, you know, if it's anything else, that's this balance between being compassionate with yourself, but also being tough with yourself and saying like, you know, that shame, that doubt, that fear doesn't belong here. Like, I'm not going to claim that as me because I'm made of love, and that's all there's room for.
That's a beautiful transition right into Tessa. Tessa, you said some incredible things the other day just around love and self-love and that sort of thing. So I want to throw two pieces at you. One, if you could share just your thoughts on self-love and your journey with self-love a little bit, as well as a little bit around what you do when it's really tough. So loving yourself it can be easy some days, and some days it's not so easy. And I'm curious your thoughts of like when the going gets a little bit tougher, how your perspective changes to continue loving yourself and being kind to yourself.
Yes. So I think I like to talk a lot about self-compassion instead of self-love, because I think the English language does us a disservice that we have the same word for the feeling. I love my friends. I love blueberries. I love going on tour. I love adventure. And for the action of love, which is, to be kind, to be compassionate, to be considerate, to be direct when you need to be, but like kind while you do it. So I think when I talk about self-compassion, people, hear me saying like, love yourself. And they're like, I hate myself. Like you're asking me for an impossible task. And like, how could I even love myself? I hate myself. And I'm like, sweet baby, like take your pressure off. You don't got to love yourself. You don't have to feel any way about yourself. Remove the pressure that you need to do this or that. Just start talking to yourself with love, compassionately. You already talk to yourself like in this third person kind of way, probably. I know I do, where I'm like, God, you tell me, stupid idiot. Why did you say that? That was so stupid. That was so embarrassing. Like, why can't you think of something to say? You're stalling. It's been a long time. Why are you still staring at them? This is a strange moment. That's what my thoughts can sound like. And then to just like come in with another voice and be like, hey, sweet child, it's okay. It's okay that you're awkward in this conversation. You are not... Being a social butterfly takes practice, and you're out of practice. That's okay. You're doing great. This person is also thinking about themselves. You're doing a great job. And with almost every experience, I can reframe my judgment about myself by being like, yo, I'm literally just here to learn. That's all life is, a learning experience. And I'm not going to be good at everything. And I'm especially not going to be good at everything when I'm out of practice or just starting. I'm just learning. And as someone who's had a lot of social anxiety, that's been really helpful to implement that. To be like, yeah, you know what? Didn't have a lot of friends when I was a young child, was an only child, was very isolated through a lot of my life and a lot of my adult life too. So I'm like, baby, you're still learning. You're doing so good.
Thank you for that, Tessa. I'm curious, when you first started down that pathway, have you been a person that started that has, you said you have thoughts going through your head that are often yourself speaking to yourself, but it sounds like earlier in life those might have been more negative thoughts, more questioning, anxiously driven thoughts. When did you when did you come to the lightning moment where you're like, wait, I got to start even trying, which probably took a long time, but trying to speak nicer to myself? Was it someone that said something, or what triggered you there?
I don't know. That's
Fair
a great
enough.
question. I mean, it was many years. I was really at my lowest when I was 20, and I'm 30 now. So, yeah, I don't know if it was any one thing, but one thing I ask myself now is just, does it serve me? So I think it's easy to double down on with shame when it's I had a bad day, a depressive day, or a ED day, to double down with shame and be like, I'm bad. And when you're doing anything, just ask yourself, does it serve me? Does it serve me to wallow in shame and think I'm bad now? Is that my higher self, as Liz said? Or does my higher mother to myself, is she sweet child, I understand, I've been there, that's okay, that was today, now be kind to yourself tonight, go to sleep, start again.
That's great. Thanks, Tess. I was actually, prior to 2 hours ago, I had never heard anyone talk about love as a feeling and then love as action, I guess. And it's just weird. I was on a podcast. There was a brilliant Indigenous man on the We Matter campaign, Instagram Live. And he brought up, and he just said, I like to view love not as a feeling, but as a verb. And we need to remember to continue to use it as a verb. And it's just pretty wild. So I've never heard anyone speak of love that way, and to hear
Wow.
a very similar thing literally 2 hours later is quite wild. But it's also a beautiful way to think about things and a beautiful way to think about love. So thank you.
Yeah.
I want to jump in a little bit to about COVID and how COVID is treating everybody. And I think we've all had different experiences. And I spoke earlier about, I think, the significant anxiety that can be produced because of the uncertain times that we're in. So I'd just be curious for us to all share a little bit about how COVID has affected our mental health, be that positive or negative. And I think we're all also learning about ourselves in a really big way. Like, when have we ever taken a pause like this from like social interaction, like heavy social interaction, not seeing friends, maybe not seeing family? So I'm also curious about what you've all learned about yourselves, or most like the biggest learning you've had about yourself. So maybe we'll kick it off with Wenji, just to hear, your thoughts on your mental health in isolation, I guess, and what you've learned.
Yep. So I guess the first thing I learned about myself during COVID is I love food delivery apps way too much.
Yes.
It's unhelpful for my health in general, and I really don't like going to the gym or exercising, but I've been forcing myself to get healthy, because I think one thing I discovered through my mental health journey is like I started I'm a bit of a book nerd. I read a lot of books growing up. I love games. I love all sorts of like things like that. And I think the benefit of that is when I went through my first like bout of depression while doing YouTube, the first thing I did was read a book on depression, because that's kind of what you do. And I learned a lot of facts about depression and ways to deal with depression through the book. And one of them was really like knowing yourself really well, knowing how you feel and what you're going through. And I discovered every time I lacked sleep, every time I didn't care for what I was eating and what I was doing with my body, I would be more prone to feeling bad about myself. And that's something I've had to learn through a long period of time. But that means during COVID, when I started, eating whatever I want and treating myself a little bit more, I guess, loosely, because I'm like, well, it's a pandemic, like I have nothing else to do. I realized my mental health started going downhill from there. And every time I don't sleep well, the next day feels horrible for me. And I know that really well. I'm very self-aware now of my body. And yeah, so beginning was bad. Then I went through a huge health kick and started really looking at what I was doing, and I discovered all the benefits of being, locked in your house. Mainly that you can be alone with your thoughts. And if you're very aware of your thoughts and control them and focus them in a certain way, you can get a lot of self-improvement and self-development done. So for me, I really went through and unpacked, my life. What do I love the most about it? What do I don't need? It's more of like a life decluttering, mind decluttering. What do I not want to include? And then being very like selective on what I'm going to bring back to my life after this. Because when everything is, gone, it's actually easier to start adding what you want versus just living every day reactive to whatever's thrown at you. So I think that's the first thing that I really discovered during COVID. I'm like, it's okay if you don't like turn up to a meeting because, everything's going weird. So I think that was one thing that I really loved about that time with myself. And with social media as well, just made me feel included for once, because it's like people's feeds stopped being like travel photos and things, and I stopped having as much FOMO as I normally do on social media, and it was more of a time of everyone banding together and sharing messages of love, which I thought was really cool. But also it depends on who you follow and what your feed kind of looks like as well. So yeah, my mental health went down and then went up. And I think now I'm in a really good place after going through and unpacking a lot of personal things and realizing how much of my life is just saying yes to things I didn't really care about, because, I'm a people pleaser. I've grown up wanting to please people and make everyone happy at the expense of myself. And I feel like, over COVID, I had more time to take back that power and went, wait, no, like, this is what I want to do. And this is how I want my life to be, and being a little bit okay if, I'm rubbing someone the wrong way, because if at the end of the day I'm happy and it's not hurting anyone and I'm really doing what I love, I think that's okay. And it's about going through that process. So I've slowly taken steps to do that. And even like just with my career, it's like, it's okay if you don't post a video, if you're not feeling and you don't want to. That's something that I've had to struggle with for a long time, being, online for so long, just this constant need to push out content, constant need to share yourself. So I'm like, boundaries, I'm going to set myself some boundaries. So
that's great, Wenji. Thank you for sharing all that. I mean, I relate to it in a big way. We had spoken about that last time when we were all chatting, just around like figuring out how to, for me, it's like the people in your life that really matters and who those people are and how you can make time for them. Because often, at least for me, I find that often the people that really matter most are the ones cast aside for those that people you may love or may like, but you end up not spending time, at least for me, with the people that really bring you up. And COVID, similarly for me, has made me actually spend more time, despite the physical isolation and social isolation, with the people that I love, because there's nothing else competing with it, really. Like on the weekend, you can go and those are your people and that's your bubble. And it's actually been quite amazing for that. So thank you for sharing it all. And I'm glad you're doing that, despite going through some struggle during the time, that you're doing all right.
Thank you. Yeah, I do the same thing. I realize that as well. Like the people I love the most, you just expect them to be there. And when you're reacting to everyone else coming into your life and you're not really thinking about it, that happens. And yeah, I'm glad we both came to that conclusion.
Yeah.
Yay.
Francis, how about yourself? What's been going on during COVID for you, and what have you learned about yourself?
Yeah, COVID, the time in the past, what has it been, like 7-8 months now?
I think so,
whatever,
yeah.
however long it's been. I think has been a really complicated time and layered time. I think something that I shared before with all of you was that there was some difficult moments in it, and I think to just elaborate a bit on that, like when I went through my first really deep depression, that was like spring 2015 to winter of 2016. Mm-hmm. I wasn't able to work. I pretty much was isolated at home, in the stasis. Like I just wasn't able to do anything in my life. And so like a year and a half passed. And I think that was re-triggering. Like that was the point. That was what the quarantine felt like at the beginning, where I was like, oh, I'm by myself again. And like, I have to like, and not only am I by myself again, but like my autonomy is gone. My agency is gone. My like comfort with myself is gone. And I'm just kind of like frazzled in this space. And so I had a bit of a rough transition into what I think now is a better time for me in the quarantine and the pandemic. I think I've learned a lot. I think there's two things. There's the personal and like life part of me, and then there's music. So I think for myself, learned a lot about grief, had a lot of self conversations about the futures that are now gone, the plans that I had, whether it was like touring or whether it was working on certain projects, whether it was flying to different places to go work on things with people. Like that's now maybe not forever, but like it's indefinitely out in the future. I think just watching like friends and family, like, and myself lose out on money, on opportunities, on actual people losing their lives. Like, I think there's this constant influx of like difficult things to process all the time. And I think that it's been an exercise in coming together and like in collective feeling through of a thing. And I think being in a family that doesn't always do that, it's been a particularly difficult challenge, but I think we're learning how to talk about feelings. We're learning how to talk about, I'm not okay right now. And just kind of starting there. I think I also learned how to accept where I am. Like I'm a person that loves control of my life, and so like I'm a person with like calendars on spreadsheets on blah 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 blah. In a way to, and part of that is definitely built into a traumatic response to the loss of agency I had in 2015, and so now that that's taken away again, I'm having to accept that. Well, first of all, this isn't the same as being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. This is a very different thing, and is not my fault. Like none of like this. This is not a shameful thing to be experiencing. That I can't control the life around me. But I think also accepting that, yeah, I mean, other people are going through their journeys as well, and so I think it's been a time where I'm learning to reach out even more to people that maybe I didn't think needed reaching out to before. Just to like stay connected to them and making sure that our friendship continues in a time when our friendship can't continue in the same way that it normally has. And I think maybe the last thing on like my own learning is like kind of touching on some points that were made earlier on self-love. I think love itself is an action, but I think it's like a series or like a container of actions that you decide what to fill it with. So for example, for me, I'm learning what it means to love myself because I'll swap it out. Like I'll be like, does loving myself today look like loving myself? Look like listening to myself? Does it look like challenging myself? Does it look like calling myself out? Does it look like doing nothing with myself? And I think I'm learning to take an active role in my relationship with myself, which is really the first time that that's happened. Because it's so easy to like distract and, you know, do everything else outside in the world. And I think I'm learning to be with me. I'm not even learning to like be with Francis, because that's a whole nother conversation. But like, I think being an artist, being a public figure, there's a version of myself that people project onto me and that people expect from me. And so no longer does that really apply. I get to sit in the corner. I could be sad. I could be tired. I could be whatever. And I'm not thinking about the Francis that people expect. Like I'm thinking the one that like is here right now with myself. And I think that's probably been the most bittersweet blessing of this time. And I think just to quickly speak on the music side, as you can see, I'm calling in from my studio, my home studio. And so I think it's both been the best because I can make music whenever I want. The worst thing is that I can make music whenever I want. And I'm really having to learn, like, when I'm just learning to balance like daily practice and daily like playing, learning to balance that with like, I'm just not feeling it today. What are you doing? Like, stop it. And so there's always that like the different parts of me are always in conversation throughout the day regarding music. And there's just so much to be in conversation about. So, yeah, I'll probably end it there.
Well, I mean, it sounds like while the quarantine has been extremely tough for you in some ways, that you've come an incredible amount of way in regards to understanding yourself and knowing yourself, and it sounds that part sounds incredible, and like there's been a lot of self-discovery. So I'm glad to hear that, and I think like both you and Wenji leaning into like the understanding yourself and how things affect you, and truly taking time to understand what's happening when you're feeling bad or you're feeling great. I know it's something that's helped me a lot during COVID. I'm a go, always rambling or always rolling, if you will. And the ability to stop and actually realize like, I'm not feeling so well today. What's different about today? Which is something I never did. And to be able to actually go through that thought process and think about the things, even it might be food, it might be the way I woke up and I went to my phone right away instead of walking the dogs 30 minutes before touching anything. Like those things are so important, and we're always all so busy that we don't find the time to do it. And we're lucky enough in some ways right now. It's part of the privilege of what's happening right now is like we're forced to slow down. And with that forced slowdown, we may get to, if we lean into it, get to know ourselves a little bit better. And that's a pretty amazing privilege. So it's some sort of silver lining outside of what is a pretty brutal time. So I'll throw it over to Tessa to hear a little bit about how COVID's treated you and what you learned about yourself.
Yeah. It's interesting hearing to Francis. It's like I forgot that those first 2 weeks, I was like, I'm going to lose my... Can we swear on this?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm going to lose my fucking mind.
That was good in between.
Thank you. I mean, like, because I've spent so much of my life isolated, working from home as an artist. And, like, I really felt like I finally was finding a flow in my life. And then it was like, shelter in place. And I was like, I can't do this. I've worked so hard to, like, have a community. And now I'm alone again, forever, indefinitely. And a couple of things. I found a pod pretty quick. I'm like, okay, there needs to be someone I see. And I also started doing these live streams because I thought back to when I was very isolated and how there was this streamer I would watch that would go live twice a week, and having something to look forward to every week made an enormous difference in my life. In a way that was invaluable. In some ways, I'm like, yeah, that is honestly what got me through that. And I'm like, I can do that for other people. And having a purpose for it within myself has made it much, given it more purpose, feels like I'm doing something. And I did that for 4 months. And yeah, just been like vibing, working on stuff. Yeah. Was there another question? Did I miss one?
No, I don't think so. I'm thrilled that you're vibing and got through that first 2 weeks and feeling good. It's great. And
ooh, I want to give a shout out to the book, The Power of Now, which was something I was really reading at the beginning. Yes, BB. Yes. Heads up, a little heteronormative toward the end, but written in the 90s, take it for what it is. It's all about how joy is accessible in every moment if you just touch base with this moment. There is no past. There is no future. Think about like a memory you have. When did it happen? It happened now, because everything happens now. You have a memory of now, not the past, a memory of now. And the things that you think about the future, like when do they happen? Do they happen in the future? No, they happen now. Everything is now. And so much anxiety and worry and shame can be removed when you become fully present in this moment right now.
I love that book, by the way. So
yes,
it changed my life.
Me too.
Bad here.
I have not read it. I will add it to the list. And I'm curious because when you're saying that, you say it with like passion and fortitude, if you will. And I'm sure I have so many questions about like, what does that exactly mean? And how do we make it happen in the now? I get parts of it, but I'm very curious. So I'm definitely going to read that.
Yeah.
Liz, let's pop it over to you. How's COVID been and what have you learned about yourself?
So much anxiety. It's just like, honestly, I mean, okay, we'll start by saying that. Yeah, actually more anxiety than I have ever felt, like new waves of that feeling that were unfamiliar prior are a little more familiar now. So it's been learning to cope with that, learning to adapt just like every single day. Francis totally relate. It's like there's so many things to process at the moment, like literally at a point where it's not just the pandemic, it's also like, this race movement and like just so many different issues that we're being bombarded with on a daily basis. It's almost like if you turn on the news, you're like, okay, what's next? Like the importance of like managing that intake for me at this point now has been so pivotal. Because I just found myself glued to the news or glued to my phone and just seeing like, what are people saying about this? How are people processing this? Without actually giving myself time to say, how do I feel about this? And I would actually notice, like, as I'm like flipping through the channels or as I have Instagram up, like we were saying, those feelings of like my chest was tight, and I would notice as soon as I would like close out the app, I'd go, like just physically my body was telling me like, no more, like it's enough intake for now. So honestly, I think a huge learning for me was to stop letting social media set my pace. I think the truth about this circumstance right now is that no one has ever been here before. Literally none of us know how to survive a pandemic on top of everything else we're facing today. And so, as much as I absolutely appreciate all of these voices on social media and the communities that are being sort of forged around wellness and how we can get through this, I think my source of anxiety, I realized, was stemming from when I was feeling like I should be doing something or I should not be feeling something. And just sort of coming to this realization that, nobody is you. Nobody has your story. Nobody has your limitations or your gifts. And so how can you compare yourself to others? How can you compare the way you're processing this to maybe what's working for somebody else? So I think taking the time to go inwards and say what really works for me in this moment. And that's been a little bit different than usual. It's been a whole lot more actually time to me in my own space. I live with some other people in my home, so it's been a challenge to actually navigate that, to be able to take my space as a creative and process things. And something that we were talking about is actually learning that where prior to this experience, I may have thought that I was an extrovert, but actually I am more of an introvert. I need that time and that space to process independently. And I realized all the ways that I was filling my time and my space with people and schedules and busyness and all of that's amazing. But it was sort of like this Band-Aid that over the course of COVID has just been torn off, and the wound is bare still. So, I think while there's been, a lot of pain, a lot of maybe open wounds for a lot of people, it also means there's a lot of opportunities for growth and healing right now, which I think is so beautiful and unique about this moment. And why these conversations are so important, that juxtaposition of this moment being so isolated, isolation being the key word, and yet we have never experienced a more collective and relative experience globally. We are very much all facing the same challenges, of course, in our own unique way. But I commend everyone. I commend the world for being in this and being willing to show up to these moments and be present, because it is it's hard out here. There's no denying that.
Thank you so much, Liz. That was beautiful. And I think also it looks like we're at time, so a beautiful way to end. I don't know if I thanked Tessa when I started that question. I may have, but that question came from Tessa bringing it up when we were chatting earlier, and I think it was just the conversation that we had offline was beautiful, so I had to bring it back up. Everything's beautiful tonight, I guess. I'll start with lovely. Used to be a good word of mine. But I really want to thank you all, Tessa, Liz, Francis, Wenji. It's been a great conversation. The only thing that we're missing from this is hearing all of your music. So anyone that is tuning in, you can check them out across streaming platforms. Just give them a quick Google. And I'm honored to have had this conversation with you guys and been able to host this. And I also am just extremely thankful to the Blue Boy Foundation, to Lauv, and to Microsoft for hosting these conversations, not just this one, but all the conversations that are happening globally that they're releasing in honor of World Mental Health Day. And thank you guys for being a part of the discussion, and hopefully you enjoyed it. And I'll go to bed listening to a playlist of all your beautiful music. So thank you guys so much, and thanks to everyone that tuned in.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for sharing. It's really, my mind's racing with things. So thank you.
It's been amazing. You've all said incredible things, and so much love tossed around as well.
Yeah. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, all of you too.